But when you sit down and you discuss it, you actually realize that there's a true innovator on the other side of the table. And I think there's a lot of people would like to do innovative things, would like to get out of their comfort zone. And if you can provide a platform for doing that, then I think you find people are motivated, they're enthusiastic, and you don't need to force them along. I've always had very enthusiastic responses because I've always believed in building a team around the idea and letting people own the piece that they contribute.
Hi, I'm Tracy Lovejoy.
And I'm Shannon Lucas. We are the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to empowering Catalyst to create bold, powerful change in the world.
This is our podcast, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burnout, where we speak with Catalyst executives about ways to successfully lead transformation in large organizations.
And today I am thrilled to have Dr. Ebrahim Patel. Ebrahim specializes in financial innovation, ESG and sustainability, and Islamic finance. His focus is on developing the capital markets of the future with a particular focus on the theme of sustainability. He has more than 20 years experience in investment banking, spending the last 13 years in financial markets and trading environment. In the field of innovation, he's led the development of several South African and world-first financial product offerings. Dr. Patel has degrees in applied math, statistics, law, philosophy, and a PhD in finance from Wits Business School. You should definitely check out his PhD thesis. It's absolutely fascinating. Ebrahim, lovely to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Thank you, Tracy. Appreciate it.
All right, so that's a short synopsis of your journey, but we'd love to hear in your own words about your catalytic journey, maybe sharing a few career highlights that you're proud of that help us see your catalytic nature.
From my side, I think my catalytic thinking became apparent in my academic background as a start. So, I've always been someone that's been interested in understanding things from first principles. And, whenever I saw there was another avenue, another aspect of knowledge, I always wanted to dig deeper and understand that as well. I was never really happy to take things at face value. And so I think my catalytic journey has started from my educational background. It's quite varied. As you said in my bio, I've studied a number of different fields because I've got a natural curiosity about things. And I think that's led me to question basic status quo. And from looking at things at first principles, what really catches me is how things can change when you tinker with those first principles. Some of the things that I'm really happy with are the products that I've been a part of creating, products that have achieved firsts in the capital markets for investors and for market structures. And also, looking at traditional asset classes, one of my favorite ones is gold, where I pioneered the listing of a gold bond that actually paid interest in gold. And that was very interesting for me because conventional wisdom up to that time was that gold is an asset that does not pay you a yield. In fact, you pay in carry costs. And going back to first principles, looking at the gold market, it really became a challenge to say, well, how do we change that? How do we turn gold into an asset class that can also pay you an interest rate in gold? So, that's one example of where I really enjoyed looking at the problem.
I'm curious, it's a fascinating example. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges that you encountered trying to create that new business model and how your catalytic skills helped you be successful?
So I think the first challenge as with trying to do anything new is to convince a network of your peers that it actually is possible. And many times you find that the idea that you have in your mind, if you take a singular view on it, if you say, I'm going to do everything, or the business unit that I'm in is going to do everything, you're going to find that you'll struggle. And what really helped us unlock this opportunity was looking at the financial ecosystem as a whole and looking at the various parts of the business. And when you look with an ecosystem view, you actually realize that you don't need to recreate certain components that you need for the solution. They're found in other parts of the business. There's people doing it already, albeit in a different context. And then the skill goes from actually building capacity to rather selling a vision, working with people, growing your team, and allowing everyone to come on the journey with you. So, and I've seen this trend over and over again in the various new initiatives that I've undertaken, is ecosystem thinking, building of a team, sharing of a vision, I think is quite critical in helping you overcome the barriers that you face. When you're dealing in a sophisticated financial market in a large corporate, odds are a lot of the components already exist. To be fair, there isn't too much in terms of base infrastructure that you always need to create. It exists in some form in another part of the organization, probably being applied to solving a different problem. And if you can build relationships and if you can look wider beyond your immediate surroundings, you often find that you find these solutions embedded elsewhere. And you find that there's natural catalysts and innovators in many different places. And sometimes you think, will this team come across? Am I going to get someone that shares the vision? But when you sit down and you discuss it, you actually realize that there's a true innovator on the other side of the table. And I think there's a lot of people would like to do innovative things, would like to get out of their comfort zone. And if you can provide a platform for doing that, then I think you find people are motivated, they're enthusiastic, and you don't need to force them along. I've always had very enthusiastic responses because I've always believed in building a team around the idea and letting people own the piece that they're contributing.
We don't often hear, so I'm so curious to follow up here. We don't often hear, so you started by sharing the challenge. It could be a challenge to convince a network of peers. And then you concluded with people want to jump in and support innovation. I feel like you must have a secret, Ebrahim. How do you get them to be excited to jump in for innovation? Because often we hear about resistance that can happen. So how do you convince them to them jumping in?
So I think it's a matter of understanding what we mean by resistance. So I think oftentimes resistance is interpreted as people don't buy into my idea, they won't allow it, etc. And I think it's the duty of the inquiring mind to actually break that down. And maybe this is academic thinking coming into play, but you actually want to understand this concept of approaching from first principles really helps in this regard, because you do get opposition, but what's important is to invite the person to explore why this doesn't work for them. What are the concerns? And you often find that the concerns are not conceptual. So conceptually, especially in the day of innovation that we're living in recent times, people get excited by doing new things. They see the challenges of the world. People are looking for meaning in their work, and they want to apply their skills broadly. So generally speaking, there's no problem of enthusiasm or motivation to contribute to something new. But there are some very real constraints on the ground. For example, the system can only book transactions A, B, C. It doesn't cater for transaction D. Or, our approval process works in this way, and what you're proposing, there's actually no approval process for it. And I think the way I've worked in overcoming that resistance is to say, okay, now that I understand why, you may be hesitant, let's look at what the obstacles are. Is there another way to do this? Can we maybe do it another way? Or I'm patient, we're happy to wait. If it's going to take 6 months or 8 months to add what we need onto the process of the system, then let's wait and do it. And I think when people find you willing to work with their constraints, you respect the constraints that they're under, you also understand and respect why certain policies are in place. So you're not there to challenge the system or to try and break the policies in that sense. You respect why they're there. They're there for a reason. And you work with authenticity to say, well, how do we add to that? How do we ensure that we respect the spirit of what's there, but find an acceptable way through the protocols of the organization to go around? When you show that willingness as a project sponsor, then people react positively. I think where resistance gets worse is where a project sponsor or someone with an idea won't accept that, there are some natural challenges, there are obstacles that need to be overcome, and instead tries to bulldoze through them or won't acknowledge them, or, starts to attack those obstacles. And then people feel that, their position is not respected. Their reality is they cannot do what you want, and then they get defensive. So I think if I can call it innovative empathy, it's a type of EQ. I think it's to understand and empathize with the resources available at the time, understand you live in a world of constraints, and actually proceed from an expectation of there being constraints and backing yourself and the team to actually overcome that and put in place what's required. I think when people see that confidence, that you're confident and you're patient and you're willing to work around, then they're happy to join with you. I think when you show an unwillingness to accept that there's real constraints on their side, then people feel that you're pushing them into a corner and they may not be able to deliver, or they may have to cross their mandate to help you, and then naturally people would be unwilling to do so.
Okay, innovative empathy. Tracy and I, our minds were blown a little bit. So we definitely want to unpack that. And the question that I have around that is, being a change agent, a catalyst, can take a lot of emotional energy, emotional labor for us to do all of the sensing and empathy that you were talking about, which means we also have limited resources or finite energy in terms of using that innovative empathy across an entire ecosystem, as you were talking about. And we also know that there's sort of a normal distribution of people's relationship to change, right? So there's the catalysts at one end and the laggards at the other. What's your advice for people about how to know how much energy to spend on whom, like what the biggest leverage points are? Because at some point as catalysts, we can try and convince the last naysayer standing, and they're never going to move, and we can like fall into burnout that way.
I think the key thing is to sense the energy of the person that you are working with. So you can get a sense quite quickly if someone is keen to work with you, has a broad curiosity about the world, and generally wants to contribute. And at the tail end of that normal distribution, you can also sense, and it comes with experience, that you're genuinely not getting any joy here, for lack of a better term, or again, using a position of empathy, you understand that where this person is, the type of role, the type of infrastructure, simply not suited for what you are proposing. And I think you also need to have a bit of maturity on yourself and say, sometimes maybe my choice of ecosystem component was wrong. Oftentimes we can also make the wrong choice as the project initiator, and our wrong choices sometimes will lead to people being strongly opposed to what we're doing, but it's because perhaps, it's not the right person. What we're asking of them is not reasonable for what's at their disposal. And you also need to be mature and say, okay, no, I think I've chosen the wrong piece of the chain. This is going to be too much of a stretch for this person to accomplish. And then to go back to the drawing board and recalibrate. I think maintaining good interpersonal relationships is the key to any ecosystem. Not everyone is going to say yes at every point in time. You may even get people that say no mostly, but they're still your colleagues. Remember, we're talking about a corporate setting. They're still your colleagues, and you still need to also understand the point that they come from. And at a later stage, you may find that they become your greatest collaborators. So you don't want to destroy your network through short-sighted execution objectives. You've really got to put people first. And no more so than when you're trying to do something new. It's many corporates have this mantra, we put people first, but really as an innovator, as a change agent, that really has to be central. And often you find, like I said, when you actually dig deeper, you find that this so-called resistance is simply because the person's not in a position to help you in the manner that you like. And it's then about being bold and saying, I'll take the challenge back. So maybe I chose component A, I chose area A, it's not right for the ecosystem. I realized that. So I then back myself to go and find the right component, as opposed to saying, the organization is resistant. No one wants to listen to me. I think you've got to learn to work with the pulse and the rhythm of the organization. Organizations are set up in certain ways, as are governments, as are societies. We're set up in a way to function. We're set up to achieve certain goals, and we're set up to enhance efficiency, flow of information, etc. And if you understand your organization and your ecosystem, the way it's set up, why it's set up that way, then you'll also understand why certain things are not possible. And you'll also understand the language of your organization and how you need to reposition so that you can work with the energy in the organization. Maybe it's a sort of martial arts background, but you work with the energy. It's a circular flow. You absorb the energy and work with it. Meeting force with force, it never really results in anything tangible for either party. You've got to understand your organization, understand the context, understand that the policies and the governance committees, etc., that an organization has, why are they there? What are they guarding against? What's the execution culture of the organization? And then find a way. And that's the responsibility as an innovator. You've got to find a way to work your idea authentically into the culture of the organization rather than trying to change the culture of the organization. So I think what's worked for me is maybe I'm not a true change agent, maybe I'm half a change agent, but it's not about change in a radical way. It's about bringing about change using the currents at your disposal. It's if you want to travel, if you want to row north, but you've got a tide that's going south, it's about going south and slowly redirecting north. So you harness the power of that tide. It always works better. And remember, social capital is a very, very important asset, well, in a corporate setting, and if you were a standalone entrepreneur. In fact, as a human being in a society, social capital is key. And you only have so much. And once it's destroyed, you actually can't regenerate it within an ecosystem. And so you need to also operate and execute in a way that enhances the social capital as well. So you can't be so focused only on the end goal, on achieving this project or this product, without also taking into stock what are you doing for your other stock in trade. So, yes, we need to execute, but can we do it in a way that also upsizes social capital, in a way that also upsizes networking? Or are you going to go towards your goal, but you're going to destroy very, very valuable assets? It's like you're driving a car and you can see the end line in sight, and there's these spikes on the road. And so you say, okay, I'm going to go over the spikes. All the tires will be blown, but I'll have enough of the rims to get to where I'm going. So great, you've gotten somewhere, but now you've got no more tires. And odds are you're not going anywhere else for a long time. So you've got to protect your assets in the way you execute, and also work within the culture of the organization, and in that way you enhance the organization, and it'll be easier to also convince of the value that your endeavors bring if people can see how it fits into the culture, how it enhances what's already there, as opposed to something that comes across as totally alien, and you're now asking people to take perhaps undue reputational risk because you haven't positioned it correctly. So that's where this innovative empathy comes from. It's saying work with the current of the organization. And that's why I believe you must network widely. And you don't network when you have a project. You network before that. You find out, who's sitting where, speak to people. What do you do? What's your objectives? Maybe there's nothing to do for months or years, but you maintain the network, you speak, then you get an idea of what's the culture on the ground, how do people think of things. And so when you do one day have something to talk about, it's positioned correctly, comes from a place of trust. Remember, trust is very important. And no one will trust you if they know you are putting them in perilous situations. It's the same as us. We're never going to trust that taxi driver, for instance, that's always driving on the wrong side of the road. We're going to say, maybe he's got a fast car, but I just can't go with this guy because it's always 2 degrees from death with him. He's always putting me in a bad situation. And so you've got to be very careful how you execute, how you deal with people. You've got to temper your ambition to get it done quickly with doing it the right way, with the right spirit.
It's so good. And as I listen to you, underneath what you're talking about is like you have the humility. There's like a sense of self-awareness and self-management that I know from personal experience, isn't always easy as a catalyst, because you're doing so much scanning to really understand the people who are in front of you. And doing it with enough people. I love the way that you've been talking about it. Like, you can't meet force with force, right? You have to like embed this into the organizational context. As I listen to that, the like inner baby catalyst in me is like, that sounds really slow. And it sounds like a lot of work. And it sounds like I'm not going to get to where I want to get to as quickly as possible. And I hear you say, you're like, maybe your martial art experience helps give you the self-awareness, the self-management to be able to be present with that. But I'm just wondering if you have any tips for catalysts who might not have sort of the humility, the patience, the self-awareness, the self-management.
The only tip is to try and develop it, to be fair. I think you will definitely go so much further if you solve for people first. So if you solve for your way of working, if you solve for your ability to connect, I think you just build, we talk about rails, putting something on the correct rails, and your own ability to execute, you've got to create the right rails for it. And those rails are created on the back of good interpersonal relationships. There's really no other way around it. And I think one way perhaps to help manage that is to have a portfolio of ideas in different phases of execution. If you've only got one idea, then you become desperate. If you have to be honest, right? If you've got one thing and it's that or nothing, if I don't deliver this, then I've got nothing to show, and then I'm in trouble. Then you become desperate. Then you get frustrated, and you become perhaps unduly pushy. You aren't willing to let the process ride out because you're under undue pressure. So you need to also generate a basket of options for yourself in different stages of development, so that if it's expected that you need to do one new thing or two new things a year, have 15 or 18 in the pipeline, and slowly cultivate them, so you're never desperate for the one thing. And that allows you to do the right thing. It allows you to see the risks for what they are. It allows you to confidently cut something out if it's bad for the organization, or if it's bad for the client. You're not beholden only to execution to the point where you become blind sometimes to the flaws. Because let's be honest, not every idea is necessarily good. Sometimes the faults in the idea only become apparent at a later stage. And if that's the only thing that you have, it's going to be really, really difficult to let it go. But if you've got a basket of good options and you need to let one or two go, it becomes easier. So I think the best way to manage that is to actually work on option generation. Try and get a basket of good ideas, and that comes from the techniques that you use to get ideas. And there's a system to that. It's not necessarily just all blue sky. You can actively generate ideas. Initially, it just used to be brain-based, but as I've gone through this through the years, I've realized that there is a system for generating new ideas that you can actually put into place. So that would be my advice. Now, I wouldn't say there's a hack that will allow you to override empathy. I'll say rather create the situation so that you can always show that empathy. Don't put yourself in a corner where it's do or die, 1 or 0. Don't be binary. Have a basket of options.
I love that so much. And I was just texting Tracy, you're blowing my mind, because like in innovation, we can talk about Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3 is sort of where my brain was going. And I love your recommendation. I mean, maybe they're all in Horizon 1, but like thinking really intentionally about the change projects that you have either internally or externally as a source of energy and hope and all of the things. Like, I just think it's a phenomenal idea. So thank you for that.
I feel calmer just talking to you. So to the question that, Shannon has been asking you of how do you sustain this, I imagine you bring some of this to the people around you and how you show up. So it's lovely. Thank you. I'm having the positive impacts. As we wrap up today, we'd love to hear about your favorite catalyst, past or present, who inspires you and why.
So, Tracy, as with most of my answers, I'm going to give you an unconventional one here. I don't have a particular catalyst, a particular person. That's just the truth. However, what does strike me is when I see innovative things happening, and that inspires me. So, for instance, on a recent trip to Turkey, I was at the Galata Tower, and the guide was saying, this is where perhaps the first unpowered or natural flight occurred when Ahmed Chalebi went across the Bosphorus from the Galata Tower. And that's amazing, to be there at that place. And what is even more amazing is what happened afterwards. So the ruler of the time said, this is great. And he rewarded him with a large bag of gold coins, which is amazing, right? But then he says, this is a man who can achieve anything he puts his mind to. And such a man is not good to have around. And he promptly then exiled him, I think it was to Algeria. So, when you come across situations that resonates with me, because I can understand, his desire to do something good, to innovate, and sometimes it's not always well received. It also speaks to the duality of risk and reward in innovating. So it's these stories and these instances that inspire me. And, and there's myriads of them. I read widely and I come across them quite a bit. So, I can't say it's X or it's Y. It's actually, 1,000 small examples of innovative thinking, of going against the grain that keeps me fit. So it's not one person, let's say, that's a source of energy. I constantly take in small bits of energy. So I'm on a more of a constant diet of inspiration, as opposed to saying, here's a figurehead and that person inspires me.
What do you do when you find those people in real life? So I hear, you're reading about them, but you also mentioned earlier you can spot folks like this. Do you nurture them? Like, what does it mean if this is something that gives you energy? What happens?
You just connect and you stay in touch, and you continue to share information. And sometimes it's got nothing to do with the project at hand. But what I've found over the years, especially being in an organization where the staff turnover is quite stable. So, it's a place where people tend to stay a long time. And what I've found over the years is whenever there's something innovative or new, you tend to find the same people in the room. It's like the same people pop up all the time. And so you sort of sense where the energy is coming from, and you're always talking, you're always connecting. And so when you find someone that has that energy, you stay in touch, you bounce ideas, and you sort of get a natural chemistry. And as a result, you do tend to form an informal network. And odds are that you will meet many times down the road, because just as I'm innovating and looking for new ways of doing things in that area of the organization where I am, they're doing the same thing wherever they are. And with ecosystem thinking, you're going to meet, and we do meet often, at various places. So you often find it's the same people that bring that energy. And even after they leave or they move on, you still connect via LinkedIn, or you send each other mails, or you even meet someone in a mall that you haven't seen for a year, and you end up speaking for an hour because you've got that vibe going again. So definitely, it's just when you meet them, you just feed off the energy, bounce ideas. It's a great space to think about things differently, because you know that you don't first have to get past maybe the skepticism. You can dive right into the meat of it, and that's about it. And I think there's more people like that than perhaps we realize. Sometimes you'll be surprised. You wouldn't expect that someone has a catalyst DNA, but when you actually get working with them, sometimes they'll surprise you. Sometimes they're more radical than you are in some of the ideas that you have. So, no, I think the key is to give people a chance to express what they're thinking, and to actually take time to know what a person's about. And you'll find most people want to do exciting things, and most people want to make a difference. And most people want to be on the winning team. And so they want the organization to be the best. This goes beyond getting paid or anything. It's just a human instinct. We're competitive. That's what drives the video game industry. People want to be on the winning team, and and if they feel they can contribute to it, they will. But it may not always look the way we expect that type of energy to look. And again, it's an investment of time to truly understand who you're working with and what makes them tick.
Well, I hope, given what I'm hearing you do in the world, that this is the first of many meetings of our Catalyst Minds, and that we will keep each other in mind in having those touch points in the
Absolutely.
future. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
I'd love that. That's amazing.
To our listening audience, if you'd
Thank you
like
for the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. I truly hope it's many more times that we come together in the future. To our listening audience, if you'd like to learn more about how to create bold, powerful change in the world, be sure to check out our book, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out, or go to our website at catalystconstellations.com.
And if you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did, as you can tell, please take 10 seconds to rate it on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And as we were just talking about, if you have other catalysts, maybe even hidden ones in your network, hit the share button and send a link their way. Thanks again.